Hello, everyone. I am not Sive Awesome, but this is still Size Eyes. So, those of you, all three of you probably, that have been watching these know me by now. I'm Adam Camac, longtime friend of Size, and he and I have a goal to record a podcast episode together in all 50 US states. We're operating off of that being the number, even if Ryanair and Delta Airlines might dispute that. So yesterday, and it may not show up as yesterday in your feed, but in terms of when we're actually recording these, yesterday we recorded in Kansas City, Missouri, and today we have hopped across the state line. We are recording at the Overland Park Soccer Complex. I'll let Cy talk about the significance of this location here in a moment, but we are here in Overland Park, Kansas for episode number 7 and state number 6. So 44 states to go after this. Cy, thank you so much for helping to make this happen.
I mean, I don't think we could have picked a better location. This is my hometown, Overland Park, and advertising for it here, as you see. Please experience Overland Park if you're in Kansas, Missouri.
Theta Overland Park.
Theta Overland Park with the line through the O there.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm really glad. This is state number 6 out of 50 in the U.S. Constitution.
And in the U.S. Constitution,
plus the amendments.
I mean, there were 13 at the that time.
Yeah, and yeah, this was built. I mean, this place wasn't here. What you see behind us, is really only one field out of many fields.
And we have reached an agreement that the Overland Park Soccer Complex, the hallowed location where we are sitting at this particular moment in time, is definitely one of the true gems, one of the true wonders, if not the wonder of the world.
Well, don't limit it to the world, Adam. I think it's not just the world. It's
The
not
universe.
just not just the solar system, not just the Milky Way galaxy.
Yeah.
And not just this universe. I think of
the
all the universes,
cluster, right?
All the universes out there, I think this is the wonder of the world. I mean, this wasn't here when I grew up.
Now I feel like we have to discuss whether there are multiple universes. But
yes.
No, this. I mean, it truly is awe-inspiring, breathtaking, hallowed ground. It's a momentous occasion being here for the second time in my life, being at the Overland Park Soccer Complex.
Who many knows?
It's truly amazing. It reminds me, in the late 90s, Tom Hammond and Bill Walton. Yes, I had to mention Bill Walton. We're calling an NBA game together on NBC.
Please.
Yes, and I might slightly mess up the quote, but Bill Walton said that John Stockton was not just one of the gems in the history of basketball, not just one of the gems in the history of the U.S., but a gem in the history of Western civilization. Tom Hammond was oddly skeptical of this and said that he had a different understanding of history than Bill Walton did. And, fortunately, Bill Walton put him in his place, pointing out that was because Tom had not attended UCLA. So for anyone who is questioning the validity of the Overland Park Soccer Complex's status as hallowed ground and as one of the true wonders of the world, we will need to put them in their place. Clearly, those individuals have not been here to experience the majesty and the sacred environment where we are so proudly sitting today.
Yeah, I'm honored that casually profound Size Eyes some days today
yes,
is able to be here. Is able to be here.
Yes.
But anyways,
very fortunate. So yes,
enough of an intro.
Yes. All right. So we will move on from talking about the greatness of the locale where we currently are, and we were talking about a few different options for how to start this episode, and perhaps we'll get to all of these topics over the course of this conversation, or perhaps we'll come back to some of these in future episodes. But something that, when we were talking earlier today, very briefly came up, but I think really deserves much deeper dive and exploration is the notion of role models and of heroes. And those are things that maybe are very similar, have some overlap, but could be different as well. So, yesterday's episode, I did most of the talking. So I will let you do a lot more of the talking, maybe even most of the talking here today. But let's start there with heroes and role models. So I guess what are those? Are they the same or are they different? And what purpose, what role do heroes and role models serve?
Mm. I think I
And
don't
if you
know.
need more time
Yeah.
to think of your response, I can talk about the Overland Park Soccer Complex for another couple minutes.
Well, I think we can go on about that for days, and we have. Yeah, role models. I think they're all around us. Well, let's first define who they are. Um, Role models for me are people. They may not be necessarily people in and of themselves. I think there's qualities of those people, or traits, or the way that someone lives their life. That
or it can be a collection of soccer fields.
Right, exactly. That's a role model, right? Like I may take certain aspects of the way you live, certain aspects of the way our friends live, parents live, whoever, and bring them into, oh, I want that to be a part of me in some way, right? So I think role models are all around us, from our closest friends to our most hated enemies. I think there's probably some aspect of them that you probably at least respect, even if not agree with, you maybe respect. And I think that's a great place to start with respect. So, and I think the thing that role models, heroes have in common is respect among at least a certain number of people for whatever they do, whoever they are. Yeah, I mean, so for me, role models, I kind of view it in this trinity, this zero, one, and all, where, in a sense, like I said, everyone is my role model, where I take aspects of everyone that I meet. It's like, oh, I want to be more like them in this regard. Um, in some aspect, no one is my role model, um, because I'm trying to be my best self, and I'm not trying to copy others or imitate others. And in another sense, my role model, if I only have to choose one role model, it's my future self. It's the person that I want to become. And if I have an intention and clarity about who that person is, then that's really the only role model that I should be striving for. I don't want to imitate other people. I can take inspiration from it. I think there's a difference between those two, inspiration and imitation. I think we can take inspiration from those people around us and people that we see on social media, TV, whatever. But I think we have to set that direction for ourselves of who we want to be, and then that's a role model for how we live our lives.
Yeah, so obviously a lot to unpack there, and the notion of your future self as your one role model. We have talked previously. I believe that was the episode we did at Amelie's in Charlotte about who you are becoming, who you want to become, and obviously we didn't record that one yesterday. It's been a while, so that may be something that we revisit here down the road. But before we get a little more into what you just said there, let's go back because when I introduced this topic, I mentioned role models and I mentioned heroes. And in your answer, you talked about role models.
Yeah, true.
Do you view there as being a clear distinction between the two? And if so, what is that distinction?
Right now, I don't think I can think of any. Um, I mean, I think everyone is a hero, in their own lives. So I think it's maybe the difference is perspective. Maybe that's one difference where I may be a hero to some person, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm a role model for them. But I mean, I feel like they're concentric circles, if not like fully overlapping or the same circle.
Right.
Um, I don't know. What about you? Like, do you see any difference, or like, it's fine if we use those terms interchangeably?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the time we do use them interchangeably. Um, I almost feel like a role model is someone that more often is closer to us, if that makes sense. Like a role model, and there are exceptions to this, but I feel like if we're talking about someone that's famous or someone who lived 100 years ago, and there are things that we're drawing on from them that are inspiring aspects, character traits that we hope to emulate, at least in part, I would not view that so much as a role model as a hero, right? If there's an author or a musician or an athlete or a business person, whatever the case may be, I feel like that would be more of a hero. And I feel like a role model would be more someone that we know. Maybe it could be someone of a different hierarchical level. It could be someone that we perceive as being a peer of ours. But I feel like a role model is someone that we interact with face to face, via one to one conversation, that we have more of a personal connection with, and who also is aware of our existence and knows who we are, who we admire and try to draw on for ideas, inspiration, and things to emulate and aspire to be. And I almost feel like a hero would be more someone that we don't know. Maybe we know of them, obviously. So do a lot of other people. I'm not sure that that distinction always works, and I'm sure that you could poke holes in that, right? Like if someone were to say their dad is their hero, I mean, by the definition I just gave, they'd be more in the role model bucket, but obviously it's not wrong, right? But I guess I almost view hero as grander in scale, and role model is more, I don't know, closer to us. There's more of a humility and more down to earth and closer to the one-on-one interaction.
I almost feel like it's maybe akin to good and great, where a role model is good and a hero is great.
But see, I don't know if I would make that distinction. I mean, good and great, I think we would say that great is like good. It's like a multiplier for good, right? It would be like good times 10 or something, right? Would equal great. I don't feel like hero is necessarily a multiplier for role model.
Well, I don't agree that it's good equals or great equals good times 10 or whatever multiplier.
Right.
I think, I guess the way that I'm thinking about it is good as in, okay, this is a good person, at their heart.
Right.
Right. And great could mean, all right, this person's really great at maybe certain, like their career.
Okay.
Where they're of course there's like, you have to be good at something skill wise, but like a good natured person, a good hearted person.
Okay.
Versus great being maybe skill aptitude.
Right. Okay.
So in that case, role models, you see those good qualities in someone.
Right.
And the hero, you see like, oh wow, this person's like really like Gray Vaynerchuk, we've mentioned him before. Like he's really great at marketing or social media, right? So then we see, oh, that's a hero. Yeah, I'm going off of your definition.
Yeah.
There.
Which I'm not sure I'm fully satisfied with my
Sure.
definition either.
Yeah.
Right. Even though we discussed, a couple hours ago that we would talk about this topic, it's like I sat there, pondering it and reading literature, on this area. That's not to say that I won't moving forward, but
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of come out raw for this conversation and just kind of brainstorm out loud, think off the cuff on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe a good place to start. I mean, you mentioned like a dad could be someone's hero and their role model.
Right.
Right. So I'm trying to answer the question: who would I say are my heroes, and who would I say are my role models, and is there a distinction between them? And once we concretize those things, then we'll get into the variables.
Right.
Right. So okay. So like heroes. Honestly, I've never really, I don't know if I've ever really gone through life been like, that's my hero, at least consciously. I don't know if other people do that. Like
let me ask something that's quasi-related.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a distinction between inspiration and imitation. Can you talk about that a little bit? That might help us with clarifying who or what we're looking for here.
So I think imitation is, let's take it to sports. So I played tennis today. You're like,
if
oh,
you
no.
want to call it that.
Oh well, I was on a tennis court.
Yes, with a racket and some balls.
Yeah, with some racket and hitting some tennis balls, mostly out or into the net.
I mean, to be fair, I did not play tennis today. I sat there and watched you lose.
Whoa. Yeah. Yes, this is a true story. But like, okay, so let's say I was in the mode of imitating Novak Djokovic. I would be bouncing the ball a lot right before serve.
That's probably why you lost. You didn't bounce the ball enough before you
I know.
served.
Well, I did a few times when I wanted to catch my breath, and maybe that was like part of it. Like maybe that is imitation and not inspiration. Maybe part of it is, I think imitation is like, okay, I want to hit the forehand and backhand, like the physical act of the stroke, the same way as a Djokovic does or as a Federer does. So I think that is imitation. And so like if you look at all the top players across sports, they're either, let's say tennis, there's strokes, basketball, there's shot. No one really has the same exact shot, stroke. But, Steph Curry is probably the best shooter of all time. But Klay Thompson's not too far behind, and he has a different stroke. I don't think it makes it better or worse.
Right. But I don't think imitation would be inherently bad. If someone decided they wanted to be a great shooter, and they sat there and studied hours upon hours upon hours of Steph Curry film, and every time that they sat down to watch film, they then took their basketball with them to their driveway or their local playground, and they tried to imitate what they had just seen on the tape, they would probably be a pretty good shooter by the end of that process. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Imitation, maybe in some contexts, is suboptimal. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. Something does not have to be original to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And just because something's original doesn't mean that it's good either.
Right. So maybe it's like inspiration, imitation is how much of something you take from someone,
right,
and how much of another outside influence you bring into it.
Right.
So like imitation is like, all right, I'm going to copy Steph Curry's shot from his dribble,
right,
like the gather, the elbow up, the follow through, right? Versus like, okay, I need to maybe improve my shot, and then I think it's mostly good, but I can, let's say, improve more on the quick release timing.
Right.
So how does Steph Curry do that? So he's really good at that.
Right.
So then I take inspiration from him and bring it into my own shot to make it my own.
Right. It's almost as if when you're looking at the best of the best in any field or discipline, if there are things that they do that can be more or less 100% imitated and will be beneficial for you to be able to do, then you should do that. Unless you can notice something that would be even better than the best. But there are inevitably going to be other areas that you cannot 100% imitate, just because based on personality, based on style, based on outlook, based on temperament, whatever the case may be, it's just not possible for this individual to implement a 100% imitation of this person who they're looking to as the greatest. So they don't. Or maybe, like, let's say that someone were to decide that William Shakespeare is the greatest playwright of all time, right? The answer would not be to imitate every aspect of Shakespearean style, of Shakespearean diction, of Shakespearean of plot structures that he uses. If you're writing a comedy, it would probably be a good idea to go look at Comedy of Errors, Midsummer Night's Dream. Look at some of these Shakespearean works And maybe there are some stylistic components to imitate in some form, but then you add your own abilities to become, I guess, for this aspiring young writer, I don't know that better than Shakespeare would be reasonable. Maybe that'd be too arrogant to believe, but to try to become better, to try to be the best, because that's what we're talking about here. So, with sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the mechanics of a Steph Curry shot is something that can largely be imitated, and someone does imitate it because his shooting abilities are fantastic. But then maybe their build is slightly different, or their athleticism is slightly different, or their leadership abilities are slightly different. So even if they've imitated the shot, maybe they've imitated the handle, but their teammates are not the same as Steph Curry's teammates, and the way they interact with their teammates are not the same, and the way that they chase after a loose ball, or the way that they play man-to-man defense, or the way that they go after a rebound, they're not going to be able to imitate every single aspect. So maybe the distinction is imitating greatness where feasible, and incorporating that or something similar to that within a larger awareness and context of yourself and your abilities and your desires.
Yeah. So like I'm trying to think, who are my people that I've explicitly thought of as role models?
Well, obviously me. I mean,
Right, yes.
I'm like 1 through 22 on this list. And number 22 would be the founder of the Overland Park Soccer Complex.
Of course, yeah. Well, he might be number one.
Yeah, someone's going to be ahead of me, I suppose. Yeah. I'm okay with that.
I think like when I think of role models, I don't know. I do think of people that I don't know.
Right.
I think of people that I know, but I also think of people that I don't know personally, but I've listened to. Like, let's say...
I think that there are, for a lot of us, for those of us that are naturally curious, that read, that listen, that explore, there are people that we don't know, where maybe we listened to a talk they gave, or we read a book, or we watched them interact with an interviewer who asked a challenging question, or maybe was not 100% dealing in good faith. And we've been impressed with the response and the thought and certain aspects of what they've done. And those people become role models or heroes, depending on our definitions of those words. Even though we haven't met them, we greatly admire what they did on behalf of something that we believe, or in articulating something that's important to us where we don't have the same platform. So it's whether we're calling them role models or heroes and making a distinction there. I mean, that's probably something that pretty much everyone, maybe there are some people who don't, but I would say probably the overwhelming majority of people, there is someone that is a role model or a hero to them that they have never met. Even if maybe they've never thought of it in those terms. If you really drill down on them, eventually they're going to produce the name of a musician, an artist, an athlete, a writer, a politician, a businessman, whatever the case may be. Somebody that they've never met who they admire and aspire to become, at least in some form, in some regard, who could be pinned down as a role model or a hero with the right definition.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the action aspect of it and inspiring action.
Right. And I'd also say, having someone as a role model or a hero, that doesn't mean that you aspire to be like everything in their life, right? It doesn't mean that you aspire to adopt every aspect, or that you are inspired by every aspect, right? Let's take the case of Steve Jobs, since we talked about him yesterday and we've talked about him before here. And so Steve Jobs, someone could look at his tenacity and his vision and his determination and his perseverance with starting and building Apple and view that as heroic, or at least something in part to emulate. And they could look at the way he was fired by Apple when he had a falling out with John Scully, and him coming back to Apple after founding Next and Apple acquiring Next, and how he rebuilt Apple and made Apple even greater than what it had been. Someone, and the things that he did at Next and with Pixar, right? Someone could view this as heroic or as elements of being a role model. But at the same time, someone could be repulsed by the way that he treated his daughter, Lisa. Someone could be repulsed by different aspects of his social life, different ways that he handled things. Maybe someone is not fond of the way that he reacted in the face of having cancer, although that's a very difficult criticism because many people are going to deal very differently with those sorts of situations. But just to think of different things in different aspects, right? Maybe some people would think he was too cantankerous at times, or he wasn't friendly enough at times, or his leadership style was different than should be aspired for. But he could still be a hero and a role model because of certain things that he excelled at that maybe others want to excel at and value, even if there are troubling elements elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. There probably is a point at which someone could be disqualified from being a role model, right? Like maybe Bill Cosby crossed that threshold, right? And you cannot call him a role model or a hero, even if his abilities as a comedian are off the charts. But then there's all the baggage that comes with that.
Well, I mean, even
there, someone could say they want to have that level of success in comedy and in television and just do it clean and
right.
as a more upstanding person.
Right. I mean, even, if you just take any person, I mean, like everyone's made mistakes. And some people more publicly, and some people more egregiously than others.
In the case of Mr. Cosby, very egregiously
right, yeah,
and very
exactly.
publicly.
Right.
Egregious doesn't begin to
yeah,
describe it.
But let's take O.J. Simpson.
Well, the glove didn't fit, so they acquitted. I don't know what you're talking about here.
Well, like,
and clearly, when he was convicted in Nevada for stealing sports memorabilia, I mean, he himself said that was just retribution for the failure to convict him in Los Angeles County. So, I know what you're talking about. O.J. Simpson, he's the juice. I don't know what you're talking about here.
But yeah, people could see his NFL, like his football career, and be like,
right.
yeah, like he was an amazing running back.
Right.
Maybe he was a great teammate. At least
we don't know.
Well, we don't know.
Al Cowlings would probably say yes. If you ask someone else, who knows?
Right. And so and that impact,
well, and if you ask that, spread into acting and advertising.
Right. But like if you ask that specific person how O.J. Simpson impacted them,
right,
they only know their interaction. They only feel the interaction between him and O.J.
I'm gonna guess most people though, with a figure as high profile as O.J. Simpson, and then you can continue with your point. I get what you're saying, but I'm going to guess that for most people they don't think about the football when they think of O.J. Simpson.
But some people do. And so if he's a hero to some people,
very, very. I mean, I guess we would have no way of.
Right, I'm not sorry.
Definitively determining this. I would assume
to be clear,
overwhelming majority believed that he was guilty of double murder and associated with that.
Yeah, yes. To be clear, I am not advocating O.J. Simpson as my hero.
Good. It's a little nervous there.
But I think it's a non-zero number. And if you are a hero,
yes, that number is 1. Al Cowlings.
But like if that's the case, then where do you draw that line of does good and great just mean then that you're trying to balance the number of people who you inspire and who you are a role model to, or who you are a hero to be as large as possible?
I mean, it is an interesting question because as despicable as O.J. Simpson is as a human being and reprehensible, and I mean, we could use whatever the worst adjectives we want to use. They describe him. Still, though, to win a Heisman Trophy, to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, to then cross over from football into broadcasting, into sponsorships with various companies, acting, right? To have a career outside of football, outside of playing football, that was largely successful for at least a while. I mean, I don't know that I would say there are things to emulate, but a young football player could watch O.J. Simpson tape playing at USC or with the Bills and try to
imitate or take inspiration from.
take inspiration from some
So
aspect.
if that's part of the definition, then he's a role model in some aspect to those people who are trying to take that specific aspect.
Sure. I suppose. I hope the family of Ronald Goldman never sees this.
Yeah. Yes.
For the record, OJ is scum. Not defending OJ.
Yeah,
he was guilty. Or at least I believe he was guilty.
Yeah, I do too.
Yes. He did it. He's awful. I don't believe in the death penalty, but he should be rotting away in prison right now.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's like a mix of like what do you want to see, right? If someone is like almost universally regarded as or someone who's done bad things,
right,
and the scale is heavily favored for bad versus good, if we're simplifying it like that, then, but if your individual interaction with them is good and you're like almost ignorant to the fact that they've been, let's say, bad to these millions of other people or like a large number of people, then I feel like, isn't it also on you to then understand the plight of or the struggle of the other people,
right?
And not just be like, oh, he's a role model for me, or she's a role model for me, or a hero, but then also there's a
responsibility to parse through it and to sort through these different aspects and figure out what is worth being inspired by and attempting to imitate or emulate, and what is not, and what is reprehensible and what to stay away from. So I mean that is part of the responsibility of someone who is looking to other people for inspiration.
Right. Where the next thing maybe we can take this is, where do you take inspiration from, or who do you take inspiration from?
Well,
other than me and the Overland Park Soccer Complex, of course.
How did you know? That's what I was going to say. Since you ordered it in terms of what and who.
Yeah.
For what it was going to be the Overland Park Soccer Complex. For who it was going to be you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Naturally.
What else would it be? Well, you largely dodged providing specific names, so
you interrupted me. I would phrase it like that.
So I will largely dodge as well, and then when you call me out on this 10 minutes from now, I'll accuse you of interrupting me. And there we go. I mean, obviously, some names I would not be able to provide, right? Because anyone that's not famous, but who I know on a personal level, I would feel like I would need their explicit permission before mentioning their name in this forum. So, I'll refrain from that. I mean, there's certainly close relatives, close friends, including you. Structures facilities that have numerous soccer fields now. Yes. People that I've worked with in a variety of personal and professional settings. There are some of those. And then, as was the case with you, there are all sorts of people that I've never met, probably will never meet, from whom I've drawn inspiration in various ways, some of whom I've mentioned on the Someday is Today podcast series with you. Mm-hmm. One of whom is definitely not.
Oh,
definitely not. Just let's make that clear here. Some of whom I've mentioned in passing, in conversation. I mean, these, as I've said, or at least alluded to over the course of this episode, these are people who are authors, who are thinkers, who are business people, who are celebrities, who are advocates, who are high-profile individuals. I mean, you name the discipline, and I can probably think of somebody from that discipline who I've drawn inspiration from, unless it's a discipline that I just know absolutely nothing about. Mm-hmm. Right. I suppose that you could get really arcane, and then I can't think of anyone, but and now you're going to.
No. I was thinking about it. I also don't want to derail this conversation.
Of course you do. That's how we do things around here.
Anyway, go.
but yeah, I mean, there are people from all walks of life that we know and don't know that, I being a part of we, uh, have been inspired by and at least looked at something that I want to emulate. So it would be very hard to narrow it down, right? I mean, there are people that might describe as intellectual influences. There are people that I might describe as lifestyle influences. There are people that I might describe as career influences or business influences. There are people I might describe as health or nutritional influences. People that I might describe as writing influences, or I mean, there are any number of categories that we could break this down into, where there are people that have influenced the way that I think, the way that I do things, whether wittingly or unwittingly. And it might be easier in some areas to identify that, and it might be harder in some areas to identify that, right? It might be easier to identify an influence on a particular subject matter if I am quoting a specific person and citing their quote to back up an argument that I'm making. Clearly that person has influenced me, and there's at least some sort of role model or heroism going on there. But I'm sure that there are people who have influenced me and could be, under some definitions, described as role models, where I don't even think about it. I subconsciously use a phrase or a sentence that I've heard them use numerous times and never even stopped to think about where I got that from. Or the way that I view something or the way that I approach something, I got from them, and it doesn't even dawn on me. I think we all do that. There's definitely a variety in terms of people that I know well, that I know on a personal level, that I know well, but maybe it's a little less personal, or people that I've never met and probably will never meet.
Yeah, like I think part of it, yeah, who we surround ourselves with.
Right.
A lot of the people that I've had on the podcast, I would say, are role models in
Right.
some sense.
Well,
Otherwise,
what would be the point of having a podcast otherwise? The idea is
yeah,
to give yourself a platform to have conversations on topics and with people that you might not otherwise have the opportunity to do.
right. And so then it's like a conversation about who are your social circles, who are the 5 people that you spend the most time with,
Right.
or listen to.
Right. Well, I mean, even if we move it away from the 5 people, right? Like I think Jim Rohn has
Yeah.
some stuff about the 5 people. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But I mean, anyone that I'm going to spend the time to text or call or go meet for dinner or meet for coffee or reach out to them to check on how they're doing or whatever or go out of town to go visit them, whatever the case may be. Unless there is a strict work/business element to it, if there's anything at all that's leisure and social related, then depending on how you define role model, I guess there's some aspect of it, right? Otherwise, why would you spend time reaching out to these people if there's nothing whatsoever that you would admire or respect about them? So I don't know. I mean, maybe I guess role model versus admiration, respect. I mean, these are all different things, but there's also some bleed over. Now, I mean, it does feel weird to think about certain people and be like, is that person my role model? I mean, I guess not, right? So maybe role model would be more on a. Of course, as I said earlier, like I didn't look up a definition before this. We're just kind of talking through this, right? So maybe role model is someone that's a little more on a pedestal. Maybe that tends to be someone who is older or more experienced or has achieved something in life that we haven't yet that we want to achieve, or has some wisdom and some guidance to provide to us. So maybe people that we would view in the other direction as almost hierarchically below us. I don't really like using that phrase,
Right.
but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Or maybe we wouldn't think of them as role models, but at the same time, if we're spending our time with choosing to interact with them, then there must be something role model-ish or that could morph into being a role model. So I don't know, it goes beyond the 5, but you're right. I mean, if we were to make a list of the 5 people that we talk to the most, interact with the most, the 5 people that something comes up in our life, right? And I'm like, I need to talk this over with someone. Who are the first 5 people that come to mind? Clearly, there's some element of inspiration or that we draw from them, and something that we may or may not want to imitate or emulate, to care enough to want their opinion and to want to talk things through with them when those situations arise.
Mm-hmm. And
or they could be an inanimate object that is filled with numerous soccer fields. Who knows?
I mean, I take inspiration from this place.
I do too. This is only my second time.
Yeah, so, I mean, in a sense, this is a hero then.
It's hard to imagine any greater heroes other than Bill Walton himself.
Of course. Yeah. Well,
unbelievable.
So I think. So we've talked about heroes, but we haven't talked. Well, maybe we have indirectly, but we haven't said the word villain. Where. What
Ted Cruz? Can't even bring yourself to say the word.
I was thinking more Bill Cosby or O.J. Simpson.
No. But so this is something I've regularly mocked. But during the 2016 presidential campaign, Ted Cruz he'd be talking about whatever, right? Then out of nowhere he'd be like, and Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they can't even bring themselves to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism.
Yeah, I get a picture of him saying it. Hopefully.
Yeah, well, he's not the only one.
Yeah.
Scott Walker and Bobby Jindal had the less quotable variation, terrorism of radical Islam. Clearly their note card had the word scribbled up when they were sent the lines to memorize.
Yeah.
And this will be the last time that anyone ever mentions Bobby Jindal for another 8 years, 9 years. Yeah. It took a while for his name to come up ever again.
Yeah.
I know, blast from the past.
Yeah. Now you have another.
Villains.
Yeah.
That was where we were.
Yes. Yeah, like, I mean, does there need to be a villain for there to be a hero? Right? It may not be people, maybe like challenges, obstacles, but does there need to be a villain in order for them to be a hero?
Are we taking inspiration if we're not trying to overcome something? If we're not trying to do something, become something. If we're trying to become something, then we're trying to overcome something, right? I mean, those things are connected, right? Someone wants to become a professional athlete. They're trying to overcome being too small, not spending enough time bulking up, not being good enough at dribbling or shooting or passing or whatever.
Are you describing me right now?
No.
Feels like you are.
Neither of us ever wanted to become professional athletes. No, but there's something that, even if it's not a person, there's something that the person's trying to overcome. And that's why they're seeking out inspiration and imitation potentially, because they are looking to someone who has overcome some of the things that they are struggling with. And they want to overcome those things in order to become a professional athlete.
Right. So then, what if someone...
I don't think either of us ever wanted to be professional athletes.
But we want to be something. We want to be a writer. We want to be an entrepreneur, a business person.
There are things we want to be. Depending on what day of the week you ask me what I want to be, I might have very drastically different answers.
Asleep is probably... one of those answers on some of those days.
I am valuing sleep more and more.
Yeah. Like, I think, we need...
Present at the Overland Park Soccer Complex is the answer on some of those days, too.
Yeah, like, I think... Well, so part of that is, like, going to desires, right? Of, like... I think part of it is we need those desires, and part of it is, like, what if I don't need inspiration today? What if I can just be? What if I don't need to overcome something? And I think there's value in that too, of just like, we're just chilling here. We're trying to overcome our ability to have a straight linear conversation by having this podcast series and this conversation itself. But like,
you speak for yourself on whether these are linear conversations. Someone who's fond of saying life is not linear. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm saying we don't have linear conversations.
We do not. We very much do not.
Yeah. But yeah, like, I think we need those things in our life to make us who we are. I was actually going to bring this up yesterday, our conversation where...
Well, someday is today and not yesterday.
Right, yeah. Sunday was yesterday.
At one time, yesterday was today and was someday, but that's...
No, yesterday.
No,
tomorrow
yesterday.
It'll be 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Now I forgot what I was going to say.
Good, that's the idea.
Where were we? Overcoming something. Yeah. So like, we don't need desires. I think it's I think just defining what we're trying to desire.
Your desire is to not have desires.
A part of me. I don't. So let's say it's 100%
Right.
pie. Then do we? I think maybe let's say half of that, or maybe like a third of that, is wanting to have no desires. Maybe half of it. I don't know. But like, I think a non-zero amount of it should be to have no desires, and then the rest of the desires, hopefully, we want it to be them good desires in terms of making impact on people, becoming a better version of ourselves, whatever that means. So I think there is value in not trying to become someone and just being someone.
Right.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think the point that I was trying to make is,
there's a point in all of
yes,
this?
yeah.
That doesn't.
So wait, hold on. I'm gonna forget it again. Stop. So like, for me being a coach, right? I think there's aspects of me, like, I wanted to be more emotionally intelligent, and there's many ways to go about doing that. But I think one way is to be a coach, be like, put on my coaching hat, my therapist hat, whatever that is,
Yeah.
and actually do those things, and not just say, oh, let me learn about emotional intelligence theoretically. There's a practical application component to it.
The Gary Vaynerchuk line, right? Don't learn, do.
Right.
It's like, how many books do you need to read about something before you actually go and do it and figure it out?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I am learning through this. Like, I've learned so much emotional intelligence and compassion just like listening to people,
right,
that I would never have learned if I didn't take the step in becoming a coach. Right. And even seeing, like, now I can definitively say, yeah, I've been in a startup. I have, like, I know what it takes to, let's say, start a franchise, at least as part of a team.
You could even have one of the locations open on a day which will live in infamy.
Yes, December 7th, which is fastly approaching here.
True.
So, yeah, like, I think if we want to become those role models, we have to almost stop viewing them as role models in a sense, and just like do the things that they're doing.
Right.
It's
almost like, in order for them to be a role model or a hero, there has to be some element of a pedestal that we're placing them on in some form or fashion.
Something that we don't have.
In something that we don't have. But in order for us to become that, we then have to take them off of that pedestal, pull them down, humanize them, because it's only by humanizing them that we can actually achieve these things that we don't have that we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, like, I don't have anything else to add there.
I know, it was brilliant.
It was so good. I didn't have any follow-up. I'm just gonna let that sink into these.
I know. While people think about fate of Overland Park.
But yeah, like, who we surround ourselves with is, and so eventually, so like right now, I've seen my social circles grow and change. I would say not grow, but I want to say change. And
so you've removed certain people as well, then.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's natural. I think there's a pruning season for everything. I mean, we're in fall right now. That's when the leaves are falling off. But no one would say that.
You speak for yourself. Having lived in Texas, this isn't really a phenomenon that we understand.
Yes, but in everywhere else, most other parts of the country,
places that experience more than 2 seasons.
Yeah.
We have tolerable and intolerable.
Yeah, like, I think, yeah. For example, some of my close friends growing up here in Overland Park, they were close friends growing up, and then we became a little distant when I was in college, and I became closer to other people in college, like yourself and other folks. And then now I'm closer with them again.
Right.
So it wasn't like we're not friends anymore, but it just goes in cycles, just like the seasons. And so, like, okay, who do we want to become? Surround ourselves with those people, then we'll eventually inevitably become those people in some regard, or some aspects of them we'll inculcate into ourselves. And then we're human, so we have desires, even though maybe I'm saying part of it we shouldn't have desires, but let's say we have those desires. Then we see other people that we want to emulate in some manner, or admire, or respect, and then we take those and we want to, let's say, surround ourselves with those people. So eventually, like, life is a game of who do you want to surround yourselves with? Question mark. And then those people will basically not dictate, but tell a lot about who you are.
Right. No, I think
Yeah.
that's all fair and accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah. So let's maybe shift gears a little bit. As I had mentioned that there were a few different things that we had talked about possibly wanting to discuss. So let's talk about goals and goal setting. Let's move there. I feel like in some ways that's connected with heroes and role models, right? Because we view people as heroes or role models because they are successful or good or have an aptitude or proclivity for certain areas that we don't, right? And but that we want, right? So, the next step would be, how do you get to that point? And in order to get to a destination that we desire, whether a literal or figurative destination, you have to have a goal, whether it's stated or intuitive or otherwise. It has to be a goal, and generally setting and recognizing goals makes it easier to achieve them, although it's not necessarily a requirement, but it's helpful. So, I know, given your backgrounds as a life coach and career coach, that goals and goal setting is something that you've thought about, not just with you, but with your clients and with all sorts of other people that you know. So how do you view goals and goal setting beyond achieving the ultimate goal, which is recording a podcast episode at the Overland Park Soccer Complex? But beyond that, how do you view goals and setting goals as fitting into someone's life?
I think it's necessary and unnecessary at the same time. I think there's several different types of goals. There's I view them as be goals and do goals.
Right. So a do goal would be eat at restaurants named after currencies.
Right. Yeah. Right. And like James Clear and or at least if we can't find currencies, then at least geographic locations.
Yes.
Whether it's Punta Cana.
A B goal would be learn these currencies and geographic locations. Be someone who is aware of those currencies and geographic locations, so then you can do the action of eating at their namesake restaurants.
Yes, and then have the satisfaction of having done all that. But I like James Clear in Atomic Habits talks about identity, process, and outcome. I think those are similar, almost identical, where it's like, what outcome do you want to have? So it's like an outcome goal, and I think a lot of people focus on those, and businesses focus on those. And then there's process goals of I want to work out X times a week.
And in a lot of ways, the process is more important than the outcome. I mean, the outcome is something that you get at the very end. The process is all the hard work and all the effort and all the energy and all the time that goes into the interim.
Yes.
And sometimes enduring a lousy process is necessary to achieve the outcome that we want. But generally, the process should be something that brings satisfaction and fulfillment too.
Right. But I think for some people get more excited about an outcome goal than a process goal.
Sure.
And if that outcome makes them motivated enough to do the process and go for it, and if some people aren't as motivated and vice versa, then do that.
Yes.
So and then the identity goals, which you can start with it, or it would automatically change based off of the process and outcome goals. So I think if you start with it, some people resonate with that of like, hey, I want to be someone who works out. I want to be a writer. I want to be a coach. So then you start with that title, and then you just shift that perspective. Like, I'm a writer, and what does a writer do? They write for a few hours a day. They get inspiration from other people. And so, okay, so I've changed my identity. Now, automatically the process will change of like, okay, now I'm going to be writing a couple hours a day. I'm going to be taking notes in my notebook all day. And then the outcome is, oh, I've created a blog post. I've created a book. I've created whatever. So I think you can start with that. Or if you want to do the inverse.
Sistina.
Right, yes, exactly. Or you can do the inverse where you almost forget about the identity. And then you start with outcome. It's like, okay, I want to achieve running a marathon. And then it's a process. What's a process goal? I want to follow this training plan to run X amount of miles, however many weeks leading up to the marathon. Right? And then eventually, maybe after the fact, or maybe during it, you say, yeah, I'm a runner. Because it took me the longest time for me to actually say I'm a runner, or I'm a writer, or I'm a coach.
Right.
And that...
Well, there's some imposter syndrome as well.
Exactly. And so changing that identity can almost only happen after you've started taking some action.
Right.
What about you in terms of how you set goals or think about goals?
Yeah, so I don't view them as always necessary, but they're certainly helpful. And I think you're right that things that we want to achieve or become or improve at, if this is something that we consciously recognize that we want to improve at, in a lot of cases it does require outcome-based goals or process-based goals, but some kind of definitive goal that we have in mind, or else we're not going to improve in that area. So, I mean, there are exceptions, right? So like if you say the goal is to become stronger and in better shape, right? So maybe saying that, hey, I'm going to go work out every day. That would be something that would accomplish that, where you're consciously thinking about a goal. That is, if you do it enough times over a long enough period, you will get there. I suppose it's not necessary maybe to set that goal, right? I mean, if someone were to need a job and the least bad option available is something that involves manual labor and they're moving heavy boxes and lifting heavy items, then I suppose just over time that would happen, right? But in a lot of cases, when we want to achieve some outcome, that outcome is going to be achieved if we set a goal that will allow us to commit to achieving it. Even if we can't always fill in all the details along the way, at least if there are some goals attached to it, right? Like if someone wanted to learn Spanish, right? I suppose that could just happen, so to speak. But generally, the goals that correspond with that would either be to use an app or a website or some kind of language learning program,
or immerse yourself in the culture,
or
live there,
or take classes, or right, that's where I was going, was immerse yourself, right? If someone wants to learn Spanish and they decided they were going to go live in Mexico City for 6 months and speak only Spanish and avoid being in situations where it was likely that Spanish would not be the predominant language, I'm guessing by the end of those 6 months they're going to be fluent in Spanish. They will have had to become fluent in Spanish. Right. So, I mean, I guess maybe one option would be depriving yourself of things that deviate from the stated goal. But, well, goals are not critical for us to achieve everything that we want in life. I feel like they are critical for us to achieve things that we recognize that we want in life, if that makes sense. Like there are things that we may want, but we don't realize it in the moment. And then things happen, and 10 years later, you look back on, you're like, okay, I did really want that. I didn't realize it, and it's great that it worked out that way. But in terms of things that we want to be, that we want to become, that we want to do, that we want to accomplish, where we want to improve, that we want to achieve, if we are consciously recognizing that, then goals are, if not 100% prerequisite, 95% prerequisite to actually make that happen, because clearly we haven't been putting ourselves in situations to make that happen in and of itself. That's why we're recognizing this noticeable deficiency in this area and are feeling the need to contemplate whether to set a goal. So then a goal is almost a necessity in those instances.
Yeah, I mean, a goal is basically a desire,
right,
and a desire is an intention. And I don't know if we can really, we can escape and be a monk and be a hermit and like just escape reality,
right,
in a sense, but like that you're like almost doing other people a disservice, like if you do that. So I mean, that's a separate issue. But I think for me, I'll bring it up again, like I did yesterday, about feelings, right? I mean, goals are essentially the means to an end, and the end being the feeling. And so what I've realized is, for me, the two main things that I'm looking for and have a desire for are freedom and fulfillment. If I feel free and I feel fulfilled, then everything, I have a much easier framework to say no to things and to say yes to things.
yeah,
Because like, is this on the path to me feeling free? Is this a way for me to feel more fulfilled? And if I'm like, yeah, I'm in a one-on-one coaching client session, then yeah, I feel fulfilled after that session, during that session. If I feel forced to come to an event from my parents for something, then it's like, I don't really feel free there, right?
I'll pass that information along next time this scenario comes up.
Yes. I mean, this is public information, and my dad listens, so.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. One of the avid listeners.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
So he's 33.3 repeating percent.
Yes, of the viewership here. But so it's like, so it's just the feeling way of setting goals is actually, I feel like it's much easier, because then if you're just like, I'm going to feel free, I'm going to feel fulfilled, then like you're just setting the intention, which is the what,
right,
and the how.
It's important to recognize the intention as well,
right,
but those are very broad intentions,
right, and then the how is like, it'll unfold kind of auto-magically,
right?
So like,
sometimes that happens,
right. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't seek out a recognition of the significance of the Overland Park Soccer Complex. That just unfolded automatically.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the coolest things, where we just set an intention for the feeling of like, yeah, I'm going to have an amazing conversation. That's part of the reason why I do the meditation. We haven't done it in ours, but
we did it the first
time. Yeah, but like with everyone else,
right,
who's been on once, we do it at the beginning, because I want to set that intention of how we feel by the end.
right.
And I don't really care what we talk about, because if we have that intention set at the beginning for how we're going to feel later, it's going to happen.
The rest is, yeah.
Time just has to unfold.
Happen, yes.
Yeah.
But by virtue of us being at the Overland Park Soccer Complex, I mean, that supersedes any meditation that we could do. Just the
birds chirping, police sirens in the background,
yes.
The sunset.
The fact that we are here means that there's going to be the correct feeling throughout.
Exactly. Well, I know you got to actually drive.
Yeah, and I know that we were going to talk about money, so that can be saved for next time.
That's large enough a topic, I think.
It is a large enough topic. Yes, there are so many ways that we can take that. So we'll keep that in mind, and we'll do that on a different someday. That
in a different stage.
Someday in the future will be today, but is not currently today.
Yes, in a different state other than Kansas.
Yes.
Or Missouri or Texas or North Carolina or South Carolina or Georgia.
Yes. So 44 options.
Yes.
Maybe we should have listeners, viewers, put in the comments what the next state is that they would like us to record.
Yes.
No promises, but
we'll eventually get there.
We'll be open to ideas.
Yeah. Well, 5 o'clock on the dot. Appreciate you coming out here, Adam, to Overland Park, stopping by at the Overland Park Soccer Complex.
Yes.
This is truly an experience.
Yes.
For us, for the listeners, for these birds as they chirp about how amazing
mankind,
this was.
For Western civilization.
Eastern civilization. I mean, I feel like Eastern civilization gets a bad rap here. They're not represented. I mean, we always say Western civilization, but, Eastern civilization too.
Well, you're much more open-minded than Bill Walton, evidently. Although, when he was calling the Pac-12 China game years ago, and he was doing Tai Chi in the park in Shanghai, he seemed rather open-minded in that moment, I suppose.
Yeah, or Southern civilization, Northern civilization, or Central.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, we need more directional, cardinal
yes,
representation.
you're right.
Here too.
Let's go record in Svalbard to represent Northern civilization.
I mean, one state at a time, and then we'll do one country at a time.
And then we'll do one subunit of other countries at a time, and then we'll get to Svalbard.
Well,
but
we should outro it finally here.
Someday in Longyearbyen.
Yes. I appreciate you guys listening, watching. Dad, thank you. And we'll see y'all next time in another state. Peace.
Thank you.